Good afternoon, Mrs. Lentz.
Hi, how are you?
We are here now to meet for the professional growth plan that we're going to discuss and kind of create together. And so, first of all, during this year and at our post-observation conference, we identified together that you wanted to work on your questioning and rigor in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about that, let's work together to create a professional goal for you moving forward into this coming year. So first of all, tell me about some data that you have collected throughout this year that you know would help you or substantiates your idea of increasing questioning and rigor in the classroom.
Well, one of the main points of data for us in our school is MAP, which students take, as you know, in the fall and in the winter and in the spring. And after their fall tests, kids are given that spring goal, and unfortunately, only about half of my kids met their spring growth goal, which tells me that the rigor of my classroom maybe is not where all of those kids need in order to grow at those different levels. And maybe that questioning that they are exposed to on MAP or those different types of questions are something that they're not getting practice with throughout my day and throughout their schooling day to day. So I think that those two things kind of go hand in hand. And so hopefully addressing that questioning and that rigor in my classroom will help more of my kids meet that growth goal, which is what we want to see overall, is that they are growing and succeeding in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. So then what I hear from you is that what you've noticed is that your students didn't meet their goals for MAP in spring, and that you, reflecting on teaching in general and about data and best practice in classrooms, know that increasing questioning, levels of questioning and rigor in the classroom is something that is advantageous to students and increases their ability to do well on standardized tests or those things like MAP, and also just helps them to be a more academic student with those skills. So that's why you focused on that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thinking about that, so now we know that some of the data that helped you to come up with why you wanted to focus on questioning and classroom rigor was the MAP, and thinking about your goal of becoming better at questioning and better at classroom rigor. I think together we could probably develop a SMART goal then that we could then monitor and look at, and you could really keep as a focus as you start next year, going throughout the summer before you get to next year. So what do you think? Let's look at that and how we could create that SMART goal together.
So I think that obviously my measurable goal and the data that we have is that MAP data itself, specifically. And so I think if my kids this year were 50%, then I think, I want your opinion on this, 75% maybe would be that goal that I would shoot for students who would meet or exceed that spring goal. Obviously more than that would be wonderful, but I don't also want to make it unattainable for myself. Or for my students. And so I think maybe saying like 75% of my students will meet or exceed their spring reading in particular is the subject I've been looking at. So their spring reading MAP goal. And then to address that through the questioning and rigor that I have day in and day out in my classroom instruction.
And I think that that's a realistic and good goal, because if it was 50% is the data that you're looking at, so half of your class, it's not realistic to say a full class, so it's not realistic to say 100%.
Right.
And so you have to have some type of measure that you feel that you can accomplish. And so I think 75% is a very good, something that you can accomplish, and so that's great. And then it's also going to give you a good idea if you chose the right thing, if questioning and rigor was something that really helped your students. And so I think that's also very good. Great.
Thanks.
Okay, so now based on the SMART goal that we created, knowing about questioning and classroom rigor, knowing what your kids scored on MAP, developing all of that together, how would this goal that we just created complement our own building and district goals?
Okay. Well, one of our district goals this year is that growth mindset and fostering growth mindset for students and for teachers alike. So for myself, it's understanding that 50% is not where I want my kids. You know, obviously in the ideal world, I would want all of my students to be meeting or exceeding their goals. But to be able to have that growth mindset in myself and not say, oh, well, you're a failure, you're a terrible teacher, but this is an opportunity to self-reflect and to figure out how can you hone my craft of teaching it and how can I improve that. So for me, it's moving forward and looking to extend my own mindset of perseverance. And I think for students, it's giving them some of those questions that are more difficult that they have to persevere through and reason through. And so by giving them those more rigorous DOK 3 and 4 types of questions and experiences, I'm pushing them to develop that growth mindset that our district is looking for and the initiative we've set forth this year. And I'm there to support them along the way in order for them to grow and develop that as we go throughout the year. Hopefully then that they then can apply that when we take our MAP test to persevere through that very long, rigorous test itself. Where they're answering questions that are of grade levels above them as it's measuring their knowledge as it increases, giving them increasingly harder questions. You know, I sometimes notice in my kids, they just are defeated at that point. You know, I don't know this. Well, they can have that grit and that perseverance to at least attempt it and do the best that they can rather than throwing their hands in the air and feeling defeated already, which could be part of also what's feeding into everything.
I think that's very good, and it's a great tie-in to our building a district goal of the growth mindset. So I can see where you've really had some good thought behind that and about why you would choose what you chose and how it connects together. And so it's very good. Okay, so how would the goal that we chose of questioning and classroom rigor based on MAP scores as far as how we came to it, how would that goal meet the Iowa teaching standards? How are we connecting those two things?
Well, I think there's a couple that connect here for me. Obviously, standard 1, focusing on that academic performance by using my student data through MAP, even through like the general like my observations as they're answering those more rigorous questions, being able to observe that perseverance skills and their responses to those questions would really hit standard 1. And would really, I would use that feedback and that data to continue to hone in that rigor and increase that rigor and questioning in the classroom. I think standard 3, really focusing on that planning and preparation prior to the lesson so that I ensure that I have those questions already in my lesson plans ready to go for the topic that we're working on, which will take some forethought from me. It's not something that I naturally have that skill of doing right now. And so being able to have those written down and planned beforehand would be good, excuse me. I think standard 4, looking at that delivery and that research base excuse me, strategies for increasing rigor in the classroom meets that standard, as well as just standard 7, increasing my personal professional growth in the area of rigor. And finally, one standard that you challenged me last time we met was standard 5 of that monitoring student progress and having students be a part of the reflection process. And so I think one of the standards that one of the things I'm going to do to really reach that standard and stretch myself as a professional is by having students self-reflect in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring, so that they are a part of their learning as much as I am a part of their learning, so that they can see that growth and progression.
Very good. And I like that you've included standard 5 because we did talk about that and how we're going to try to focus more on that standard as we go through. And so that's very good that you have a plan to actually tie your goal into that area of growth that we talked about and how you're going to do that. So that's very good. And I hear that what your plan is to get that student reflection. So they're then going to take ownership of their learning and look at the data in fall, reflect on it, look at the data in winter, reflect on it, compare their growth, make a plan. What am I going to do to help me get to my next level, to get to my goal? So that's great. I appreciate that. Okay. So now we have the goal. We've talked about how it ties in to the standards, how it ties into our goal as a district. So what's your action plan? What's it gonna look like for you? Because now we've got a focus, so how are we gonna move forward with it? What's our plan, what's our map?
That's a really good question. I think for me, knowing that questioning and rigor is kind of my focus, I can use my time over the summer to really build my professional understanding and knowledge of the topic by reading some blogs out there of teachers that I follow who I know have some knowledge in that area. I know you and I talked about potentially looking into some books that, if you run across them, that's something that I'm looking for too, is to see if maybe there's something out there that I can read to increase my knowledge. And then looking into even some workshops to maybe attend, just to kind of increase my personal knowledge and questions that I have, or skills that I have in those areas. And then I think moving into next year, I want to be really intentional about writing those 2 questions in my lesson plans. At least 2 is going to be my goal, so that I have them day in and day out to build that structure into my day, so I can look back and see the process. Because if it's not in front of me, I don't always, there's so many things that come in throughout the day. And then I have I'm going to create a reflection goals sheet for students to fill out so that they can track their learning as well after each test. And so they will be able to see their progress and progression throughout the year in MAP and in their thinking and learning, as well as my own progress.
Very good. And before we go on, you did mention, and because we had talked about this in our post-observation conference and things that I could do for you, and you did mention a resource about books. And so what I did do is I found this book. I didn't actually get the book yet because I want you to do your own research on it. See if it's something that it's kind of hard to pick books for other people. Mm-hmm. And so it's something that looked good to me as far as a great resource based on our discussion about what you wanted. But I want you to do a little bit more research and see if that's something that would be interesting to you as far as being able to learn a little bit more through a book study on raising the rigor in your classroom and about that questioning technique. Yeah. That you want to know. So you can just go ahead and take that with you. That's a copy for you.
Excellent.
You can kind of do some research and then just come back to me and let me know, what you think about that book and if that's a good resource for you to read over the summer. And you have more time. Yes, so that's good. Okay, and we've kind of touched on this, but I'd like to really focus on it because I think it's an important question for us to really think about. So you kind of have a plan. I hear the plan is going to be that you're going to really increase your own professional understanding and knowledge over the summer. Mm-hmm. And then when you come back, you're going to really have in your lesson plans, you're going to make an effort to have those 2 higher order actual questions written for your reading block, because we're really talking about reading. Now you can obviously do it through other subjects, but we're going to focus on reading. So through your reading block, you're going to create a reflection sheet. So that's kind of what your timeline is. Yeah. So what kind of supports or resources will you need to be able to accomplish this goal?
Well, I think that, having the flexibility and freedom to go, if the workshop is something throughout the school year that I can't do over the summer, having that ability to attend that workshop, if we can talk about it and see if that's something you agree meets kind of my personal goal, professional goal. And I think even there's a lot of great resources in our own building. And so being able to go see some of those teachers that I know have good questioning techniques and rigor in their classroom, or even if you can suggest some that you've been in, mm-hmm. that you think would be a good example for me to go and see, just to learn from those people even in our building. And I think, as you observe me this next year, we always talk about what's that focus going to be for us. I think if this could be our focus, just so I'm getting that feedback from you as you're in there, and I'll touch base with the professional, the instructional coaches during our PLCs and things like that, just to really show them where my focus is this year, and hopefully then they can support me as well. Mm-hmm. Just so I can kind of have that support in this area that I know is an area of growth for me.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, and so now we have a plan, and we have the timeline of that plan. And we know what supports we need. So now it's time to decide how are we going to determine if we've met that goal. So how are we gonna know that 75% of the students, because that's gonna be our goal, 75% of the students will meet or exceed their reading goal on the map?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the data speaks for itself. I think if we look at, what those scores are, and then they take their spring data, and we look and see, did they meet it or did they not? And I think that right there is going to be some hard data we can look at, as well as just notes from your observations, my lesson plans, which will have those true questions in there to show that I have been in fact asking those questions and preparing those questions for the lessons. And I think those combined will prove whether or not I've met my goal.
And also another piece that I don't want us to forget, because I think it's going to be a great piece, is also having a discussion and a reflection, the two of us, as we come back and on another post-observation next year, or just to re-talk about your professional growth plan, is to look at that student reflection, because you're going to work on that as a standard 5, and so you're going to create that form and they're going to use it. And so I think we should sit down, and maybe something that you could also do with your instructional coach or your PLC team is to maybe throughout the year look at that reflection too, maybe from fall to winter. And then from winter to spring, we'll look at the collective data to say, what did the reflection tell us?
Right.
And then also those other things. So the map data directly, the lesson planning, and then my observations, having that focus on your questioning skills and your classroom rigor. So I think that's very good.
One thing that reminds me, we do data cards for our students. So we have cards with all of their data coming into 4th grade, as well as their data throughout the year in each subject. So maybe attaching their reflections to those data cards as we're sorting. We use those to sort enrichment groups or modified groups, or kind of to see who's getting what they need right now. But attaching their reflections to that might be helpful in that discussion as well.
That would be very good. I think that's very helpful. Great. So now we've got a plan. And we've got a goal, we've got a plan, we know what we need, and we know how we're going to measure it. So what do you think might be some obstacles? It's always good to reflect on what you think might be a roadblock, so you can kind of prepare for those roadblocks. So what do you think might be a roadblock?
For me personally, it's going to be in crafting those questions, because it's not an area that I focused on yet. So I think reaching out to those supports in the building are going to be huge for me, because I think that that is an area that is not my strong suit. So to really make sure I'm hitting those DOK 3 and 4 questions, running them past someone in the beginning until I can get into a groove would be probably an obstacle that I'm going to have. As far as students go, this is the first year we've tried to implement that growth mindset initiative, and that's a hard thing to foster in kids. And so when I ask those more rigorous questions and expect those more intense thought processes to happen, I could see for them an obstacle could be shutting down, not wanting to persevere, not wanting to answer that, or really thinking through that. So for myself, it would be to support my kids in fostering that growth mindset and perseverance, so that they are able to answer and rise up to that rigor and challenge that will increase in the classroom.
Very good. Okay, so we're kind of at the end of the professional growth plan. So before I kind of sum it up for us, do you have any questions, or do you think we have a clear path here?
No, I think we have a really clear path. If you could suggest some teachers in the building as you think about it next year, if we could go in and see who you think might be good. And always just, I know you have a lot on your mind, but in the back burner, if any of that questioning and rigor come up as far as PD goes, or books, I appreciate this one. I'll look into this one for sure. But I'm always interested to learn and grow. So anything you could send my way would be great.
That sounds great. Okay, so as we're wrapping it up, I just want to make sure I know what my role is and kind of what your plan is.
Sure.
So we leave here with a good roadmap.
Absolutely.
As you go out and go to the summer and have your break and get ready to come back and start a new year. Okay, so for my role, I need to support you in professional development. So if there is an opportunity for you to go, and it's during the school year, to give you that opportunity to go.
Definitely.
Not only that, is it to keep my ear to the ground and to see if I hear any really good professional development that's available out there on this topic, to send it your way so that you can evaluate that. Another thing that I can do to help you is to give you out of class time to go observe other teachers who are already identified as people who have rigor in their classroom, and that you need from me to give you those suggestions of who they are, or you yourself will give that suggestion as well. But you need that time to be able to observe that and to have some conversation with them to be able to talk about it. And then also during my observation times when I'm in your classroom, you need my focus to be specifically on your questioning and rigor in the classroom, and you need feedback on that. So that's what you need to get from me. And then I also heard during our discussion that you would like some feedback on your question development. So you would like to be able to either partner with somebody or turn them into me to say, okay, so here's what I've developed. What do you think? And so you really want to work with somebody, at least at the beginning of the year, to really get your skills up on actually developing those questions, because that's something you feel. So that's kind of what you need from me.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then what I hear you're going to do is that over the summer, you're going to, excuse me, increase your professional understanding and knowledge. What you're going to do is go to teachers' blogs that you know that have that. Maybe read a book if we can come up with one, between now and the end of the year, or you find one yourself. That's going to kind of help you. You're going to look for some professional development, do some research on your own. And I have a suggestion too of something that you might want to. As you're doing all of that, maybe start to develop a questioning bank of those DOK 3 and 4. So there, in all of this research, you may come up with, oh, that's a good reading question, or oh, that's a good reading question. And you might remember, like, okay, I teach it during this time. I teach, as I observed, the text structure. And then it's like, oh, that's a great, level 4 for text structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you could kind of put that in your little bank. But so as you're doing that, I would suggest, like, just creating that bank of questions. So you don't feel like you have to do it every day. Just a suggestion.
Thanks.
And then as you come into the beginning of the school year, then your goal is, and part of your data will be to have in your lesson plans those very specific highlighted questions, like here they are, and we're going to use that as part of our data. That you're going to have observations from me, and then we're going to use that as part of your data, and then you're going to have those students do that student reflection. And then that's also going to be part of your data, and then we'll talk about the map. So that's kind of what you're going to do at the beginning, is you're going to develop those questions, use them, have the students reflect. We're going to talk about it, and you're going to get all those supports as the school starts.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have a great plan. So we'll finish off the year strong, and we can go to the summer getting ready for higher questioning skills and classroom rigor.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lutz.